So both Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have a lot on their plate. They are basically setting up the entirety of the Star Wars roadmap that's going to be announced at Star Wars Celebration, which by the way takes place in London this year, followed by D23 that's going to hold even more announcements for the future of Star Wars on Disney Plus and also in the theaters as well, since Bob Iger wants to focus on movies again. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I thank you also very much for the kind and great support. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. Now that brings us to, of course, where Jon and Dave stand today. Well, they're busy promoting both Mando Season 3 and the Ahsoka Tano series, which, by the way, Ahsoka is slated to be released sometime around July and or August. They're trying to decide on which month is better. Given that Mando releases this March, it's going to run through, of course, toward the spring, and then they want a little bit of a break after that until they roll into summer. Now, that brings, of course, a lot of questions to the table and exactly what Bob Iger recently did to actually make room for the roadmap, not just for Star Wars TV shows, but also for upcoming Star Wars films. Now, we already know that Iger is picking up a lot of things where Chapek left off. Chapek was really trying to stabilize the roadmap by cleaning up house over at Lucasfilm, and also really getting rid of a lot of influence by Kathleen Kennedy. Now, one thing about all of this is what Iger recently did that has to do with a new Star Wars trilogy that was cancelled, a handful of Star Wars movies, that was actually a big Kathleen Kennedy project that almost happened, that would have really been a big controversy and created a lot of backlash. So let's dive right into this and exactly what this really all entails, and let's elaborate. Now, with that being all said, with many new Star Wars TV shows in the works by both Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, Disney CEO Bob Iger recently has been making major changes behind the scenes over at Lucasfilm. Now further, it's noted that recently Bob Iger cancelled a major Star Wars trilogy that was on the roadmap of the franchise that was greenlit by Kathleen Kennedy back in 2021. Now, this Star Wars trilogy was going to be Kathleen Kennedy's version of the Old Republic that has now been officially cancelled by Bob Iger, as both Jon and Dave are working on their own version. Kennedy's version of the Old Republic has now been officially cancelled behind closed doors, since Iger knew it was going to be a massive flop at the box office. Kennedy was planning on gender swapping many characters and promoting extreme agendas within her story that was set the focus away from character development. So let me just focus on this quick. The fact that she was going to gender swap a lot of characters in the Old Republic is uncalled for and completely just out of line. That's like saying, for example, if they wanted to bring in some of the characters, like Boba Fett for an example, into a Star Wars show, and make him into a woman, basically swapping the gender. They would never do it with Boba Fett, I understand that, it's just a little example of what that really means. So basically what Kennedy wanted to do is that she wanted to do this with characters like Revan, Malgus, Sion, and of course even others like Zana and more. A lot of the Sith-oriented characters were going to be gender swapped by Kathleen Kennedy, and that really just comes across as being very extreme when it comes to agendas and trying to really just center it on one side. Now, obviously, this is never going to happen. This has been long remembered by the Disney, higher-ups, the Disney board members, whatever have you, as probably the biggest example of Kathleen Kennedy's extreme agenda, and why I think a lot of fans should be a little on edge, or even very on edge, about what's going to come out of the Acolyte and what's going to come out of Skeleton Crew. Now, we've already heard that Acolyte is a very agenda-driven show, and it has a lot of, things that were inserted in there by Kathleen Kennedy's beliefs on how Star Wars should be, and the same exact thing goes for Skeleton Crew. Now, the next thing that I do want to point out is that given that Favreau and Filoni are now co-writers for the new Old Republic trilogy that's in the early development phase, this old one, the original trilogy that was being created by Kathleen Kennedy, it really wasn't going to be Old Republic. It was basically going to be Kennedy's own version or vision of that era. that really was going to be very distorted and just very out of place. Next thing up, of course, is that Kennedy was also focused on completely reinventing characters, like I said before, Darth Revan, Bane, and yes, even Malgus. Chapek was trying to get this cancelled off the roadmap near the end of 2022, until he was fired, and now Iger picked up where Chapek left off, by cleaning up the roadmap of all greenlit projects by Kathleen Kennedy that are now being replaced one by one, with, of course, installments geared to be made by talented creators to replace those. Now, John and Dave are set to be co-writers, like I said, of the replacement Old Republic trilogy that will stay true to the Star Wars lore from the games and the books. This was the biggest decision Iger recently made in 2023 so far to ensure Star Wars will thrive and survive. Now, obviously, this would have been a very big problem for not just Disney, but also for the Star Wars fans, especially the hardcore fans that love the Old Republic and really just cherish it. If you guys have not seen the Old Republic cinematics, if you're new and you're just hearing about this, check them out. It's really going to move you as a fan. It's really going to make you realize that great things are coming by Favreau and Filoni, because they are staying true to the video game cinematics and even the books of how these new movies are going to operate. And I think that's what a lot of fans need right now. They need something new, something fresh off the table, something that's more geared toward the prime of the Sith and the Jedi. Something that we never really got to see. Now, sure, we got to see the Jedi in the prequels, I get that, but we never got to see tons of Sith going up against tons of Jedi and stuff like that. That's what they want to do in the Old Republic trilogy, so to speak. So, with that being all said, the other thing that I do want to point out that's extremely important is that Iger is making sure that none of this can ever be reversed. Basically, nothing that was greenlit by Kathleen Kennedy cannot be reversed by any of the Disney board members. You know, it's all been grandfathered in, you know, in case if new board members came on, or if Bob Iger pretty much got replaced by somebody else. He's making sure that this plan is grandfathered in from Disney to Lucasfilm to only allow John and Dave to take control over this Old Republic trilogy. And that's great news and all, because after all, let's face it, John and Dave are the guys that really care deeply about the fans. It's not just a job to them. It's not just about them being writers and directors and producers. It really is something that they're passionate about. And that's why, you know, you see that in The Mandalorian. That's why you see that in the scenes that involved Luke in the Book of Boba Fett. So, we have a lot of things coming, and I think that things are going to look very different when 2025 arrives, and we look back at 2022, and we'll realize the transition, the contrast, whatever have you. So anyways, drop a comment below. Fill me in on what you guys think about all this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Night to moon, we hear them moans again.